Today we're pre-recording our session. We're doing something a little bit different, but we have with us here today Alex Silver from ACC NYC, our good friend who's been with us for the past few bar calls. And we'd also like to welcome Dr. Miranda, veterinary specialist. And Dr. Miranda, take it away.
Hello, thank you for having me. I was just saying that I could talk about this topic for literally hours. It's such an important way that we can help our populations in our shelters. We can help keep our pets healthy. So it's something that most veterinarians are going to be pretty passionate about. So let's talk about spays first. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to just go through exactly what the surgery is. And then I'm going to talk more about like how these surgeries help benefit not only the pets, but also the owners and then the population of pets as a whole. So a spay is known as an ovariohysterectomy in like medical lingo. It means it is the removal of the ovaries, both ovaries, and the uterus. You may hear of other people. There are new techniques being developed every day in veterinary teaching hospitals that have some remove only the ovaries, different approaches to enter the abdomen, but for the most part, a spay refers to the removal of both ovaries and the uterus. So what does this mean for the pet then? Basically, when you remove the ovaries, you're going to remove the main sources of estrogen. And when you remove that source, you remove the chances of them, and this is kind of one of the biggest things that we prevent with spays, you remove the chances of them developing breast cancer. So all of you are familiar with breast cancer. It's a terrible disease. It affects millions of humans every day. And it is the same for our unaltered female pets. With every heat cycle that an unaltered female dog goes through, her chances of developing mammary tumors increases. So when you remove those ovaries before she goes into her first heat, there is a 99% chance that she will never develop mammary cancer later on in life. Generally, when they develop these tumors, they kind of have a 50-50 shot. So by the time you find them, there's a 50% chance they could be benign, easily removed by surgery, and there's a 50% chance that they could be malignant and spread to other parts of the body, generally the lungs. So I am a shelter vet, so I definitely do see a lot of mammary gland tumors, mostly from people who are surrendering an older pet. And you kind of run your hand along the belly and you find it and you're like, ooh, okay, here we go. We're going to take x-rays and we're going to see, where are we going with this? And then, so that's for dogs. When I run my hand underneath a cat and I find a mammary gland tumor, those are 90% malignant. So generally, when you find a mammary gland tumor in an unaltered female cat, by the time you find it, it's already spread. So it can be really heartbreaking sometimes when you have, an otherwise very healthy young animal, very preventable disease, and you find it and you're like, oh, come on, So that's one of the first things I think of when I'm like, oh, please spay and neuter your pets, mammary gland tumors. The second thing that I generally find in unaltered females, and this tends to happen to younger females, so younger to middle-aged, is a pyometra. Okay? So a pyometra refers to an infection of the uterus. You take out the uterus, you can't have an infection in it, so it's fabulous for a spayed female. They're not going to get one. But generally when an animal goes into heat, the cervix will actually become looser, and it provides more access for bacteria from the environment to go into the uterus and establish an infection. Usually, I would say most of the pyometras that I see are either surrounding heat or surrounding like a failed pregnancy. So they develop a really terrible infection in their uterus. And what comes in is an animal that has been just not quite right for a few days, lethargic, not eating. And when you look at the vulva, you see some really crazy discharge. And as soon as you see that, you're like, oh, okay, this animal needs surgery. So you wind up having to spay those animals anyway. Sometimes, I will say, when I was in school, we would have some breeders who did manage to pay quite a lot of money and spend quite a lot of time with their animals in the hospital in order to clear that infection and continue to use them to breed. However, it's very, very touch and go with these animals, because when you have such a small animal like a cat, say a cat pyometra, it can be very dramatic when you actually see it presented. Actually, I can even think of a case 2 weeks ago of a cat that came in. We weighed her, she was 10 pounds. After her pyometra surgery, she was 8. So these can be very, very dramatic infections, take a long time to recover, a lot of supportive care, and it could have been prevented with, a 20-minute procedure when the cat was 6 months old, nice and healthy. So those are my two main things when I'm thinking about please spay your pets: mammary gland tumors and pyometras. Okay? And then, of course, there's also the fact that a spayed female cannot get pregnant. So I'm not going to see, I was just also talking about it's kitten season right now, and our incubators are kind of full of crying babies. The fewer cats that are able to pop those little guys out, the fewer hands we need to feed them. And those guys need to be fed every 2 hours. They're very fragile. It's a very tenuous time of life. So the fewer times that humans need to intervene to help a cat raise her kids, perfect. So there's my soapbox spay. For neutering. Neutering oh my gosh. What is orchiectomy? That's a fancy word for neutering. Orchiectomy in males, it will always refer to the removal of the testicles, both of them. Sometimes you will find animals where their testicles have not actually descended into the scrotal sac. Those are called cryptorchid, like hidden testicle. And for those guys, you will hear of people who have had to have their animal's abdomen entered in order to neuter them. Those are actually extremely important when an animal only has one descended testicle. The testicle that is not in the scrotal sac has a very high chance of becoming cancerous. So it's kind of non-negotiable. When you have an animal who only has one descended testicle, you're definitely going to go into the abdomen and try to get the other one. And then neutering your dog, it has a whole host of both behavioral and medical benefits. Medically, these guys are less prone to prostate disease. Just like men, a lot of older guys will experience benign prostatic hyperplasia, where the prostate just becomes larger and larger, and it causes issues with them trying to urinate. And oftentimes, when you do a rectal exam on an older dog, I feel like 90% of the time I'm gonna be like, yep, that is enlarged. And when it does start to cause problems later in life, it can be infected, or just the size alone can cause problems. The answer is to neuter them. So you're either going to have your dog neutered when he is young and healthy, or you're going to have him neutered when he is old and not healthy. They also are prone to a very nasty disease called a perineal hernia when they are intact and older. And what that refers to is the testosterone actually causes the muscles around the anus to become weaker. When that happens, the rectum goes through, and you can actually see a large bulge right next to the anus where the colon has actually deviated into it and filled with stool. That is also a very difficult surgery and very touch and go in mostly older animals. So, neutering, amazing medical benefits. As far as behavior goes, there are some animals where after they've kind of developed this testosterone related aggression and then you neuter them, sometimes it will actually help. However, the main behavioral benefits occur when you neuter them before they get to that point. So the younger that you neuter your dog, the less chance that you're going to have undesirable behaviors like mounting, seeking females, so like roaming, trying to find a mate, and aggression. So that's another thing that a lot of people ask about spaying and neutering. Okay, so we've talked about it. There's terrible diseases that they can get that are very easily preventable. When do I do it? Okay, so you've just got your new puppy. When do I get this guy neutered? When do I get her spayed? So in the shelter system, we neuter and spay kittens when they hit 2 pounds. So that's 8 weeks of age. They are tiny and they do just fine. You don't have to be that on the ball for your own pet. You can wait. Generally, the time that we recommend for an own pet would be about 6 to 9 months. From my personal experience, the surgery is easiest then. They have pretty much finished growing. They are not so small, like those teeny little 2-pounders that you're kind of like looking at an abdomen that's the size of your fist. It's like, oh my god, I don't know, what the heck is it? But you can easily find the structures that you need to. You can easily recover them. You can easily manage them while they're under anesthesia. And then they recover nicely. They go home to a nice, loving home to recover. So 6 to 9 months is when I tend to like these guys getting spayed and neutered. And then, yeah, cost effectiveness. You know, I think I already touched on it, but treating these animals later in life from these preventable diseases, it's so expensive. It's very expensive, and a lot of times, you know, these animals kind of wind up getting euthanized because there's a financial issue and we can't treat this. However, if we got on top of this early in life, maybe we wouldn't have to admit that cat with a pyometra. Maybe we wouldn't have to, or even if it's just a regular birth, you know, maybe we wouldn't have to admit that mom who's giving birth. You know, it actually saves you a lot of money in the long run to keep them healthy from the start. Spaying and neutering. Yeah, and the rest of my notes here are mostly just kind of extrapolating on the same things that I've talked about. So I'd love to take any questions that you guys might have. Uh, Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. You would recommend 6 to 9 months, but if a year goes by, I mean, is there a time when it's actually counterproductive,
Yeah.
I guess?
So not so much counterproductive, but for females, once you go past that first heat, your risk of developing mammary gland tumors in that pet has already increased. Now, there are working dogs actually where they will wait until they've had their first heat for development purposes because it does help them build muscle. So when you've got a dog who needs to be like running and jumping and like, you know, bite training people for the police, they will actually wait and kind of take that elevated risk. However, I say better late than never. If you feel more comfortable spaying after the first heat, okay. You just have to understand that there is a higher risk after they've already gone through heat once. Males, just neuter them. All of their health benefits, you know. I mean, like I said, the behavior thing, if you are trying to kind of play catch up, oh, my dog is aggressive now, I'm going to get him neutered and that's going to help, it's not going to help as much. But yeah, I mean, I would say 6 to 9 months is my golden time. Some people for large breed dogs will say wait until they've developed a little bit longer. But for the most part, like if you've got a little Pomeranian, they don't need to be bite trained. You can get them spayed and neutered at 6 to 9 months.
Do you mind if I jump in? Because I actually had a question, or more,
Yeah,
I guess
sure.
more of a little bit of a comment question. I don't know. Cats can actually have litters. Like, I don't know if it's the same with dogs, but cats can have litters as early as 6 or 7 months, right? So, you do still.
Yep.
Yeah. So if you are waiting, you have to just be careful because they cannot. I think a lot of people may not know that. I certainly didn't know until fairly recently. I think that a cat so young could already have a litter. And is it the same with dogs, or are they older?
Kind of depends on the breed, I would say. But most of them hit sexual maturity right around 9 months. Like 9 months to a year, you can absolutely see them start to breed.
Thank you.
Another question or comment, or I guess things you hear around the dog park are, well, I don't want to get my dog fixed because he's going to be upset.
Yes.
What would you say to that? Do they feel a loss of some sort, or jealous of other dogs that may not have been neutered?
A lot of it is anthropomorphizing animals. So how would you feel if you got rid of them? Well, the dog does not know what's happened to them. I wouldn't say that I've ever encountered a dog where post-neuter, his owners came to me and was like, he's depressed, just staring into his coffee every morning, staring at the walls. He doesn't know what to do with himself. No, they know what to do with themselves. They're very happy, same bouncy puppies that they always were before and after. So I have never experienced that in my clinical findings, that they miss their testicles.
I think it's so important that I don't want to just walk away. I really want to be educating whenever I have an opportunity to do this, because it does happen so often. I just don't see the value of adding more of these dogs to the world that are probably not going to get adopted. And it's usually pit bulls and Rottweilers of that nature. And I already know that we have a lot of problems. I assume we still do have a lot of problems getting dogs out of the shelters. So I just like, doctor, is there just something I could tell these guys, like,
So
quickly?
that's
Just
something I've struggled with myself, honestly. Even in a professional capacity, like I have had owners definitely come in with their 4 or 5-year-old male intact dogs, and I'm like, so when are we gonna get those off? I mean, I'll be honest, there's no like magic phrase. What tends to work, however, it usually is the cost. Because when you have someone who's like, oh, I really want to have him have a litter, I want to breed him, he's a beautiful dog and all that stuff, I generally do talk about cost. Like, do you know how much it takes to hospitalize a female? Do you know how much it takes to neuter them and give them the antibiotics? It's a full month of antibiotics. Generally, these are large breed dogs, and it can cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars to treat prostatitis or benign prostatic hyperplasia from being intact. And then one of the most effective things, and this is unfortunately not something you may have access to, I show them pictures of a perineal hernia and what that entails. Like, this is what it looks like when you have a dog unneutered, 12 years old. It's not a pretty sight. You could probably Google it and find some pretty dramatic pictures. But yeah, and these conditions that I'm talking about, they're not rare. Like I see a lot of unneutered and unspayed male dogs in the shelter, and these things come in regularly. I mean, I was able to pull an anecdote about a pyometra from 2 weeks ago.
There's plenty of puppies to adopt,
rare.
obviously, that aren't wanted.
Absolutely. I love dogs and I love cats, and I really want to not see them in my shelter. I want to see our populations at a level that we can control. I want to see our animals getting the best care that they possibly can without my team being stretched, because they're trying to take care of as 200, 300 animals at a time.
Can't even imagine.
It's a sad situation, it's a very difficult situation too, to kind of be fighting at the front of the lines for this, watching these animals go through being in a shelter. It's very hard.
Yeah, well, we have in the ways, I'm sure you can imagine, we live by the beach and everything, and you wouldn't believe how many feral colonies there are in the community. It's very sad, because they're surviving off of perhaps whatever scraps people donate to them, but they're in for a long suffering life, well, short suffering life.
Yeah.
But if you walk on the boardwalk in Rockaway, you'll see dozens of cats at any given time.
And for what we might call community cats, we TNR, trap, neuter, return. And if anyone, there are some great workshops for free that New Yorkers can become TNR certified, and that can really help those cats that are out there. And cats can thrive outside if they're usually they have at least one, if not more, caretakers. But TNR is super important. And if anyone has any questions on that, ACC actually has a community cats expert, and you can email communitycats@nycacc.org. And certainly, if you see a cat that's out there on the boardwalk that's just not doing well, that needs help, please, do contact us, because we do want to help those cats. But TNR, we need to keep promoting that as well.
I think it's a big thing. I mean, in the boroughs, I think you see a lot in the communities. Maybe not so much in Manhattan, but we have a lot in Queens, a lot of feral colonies.
We have a colony like right here where I live too. I see them all the time.
Aww.
But we have a caretaker here who also will bring them in. So
I know
our colony is very stable.
Right. You'll see people going down there. I saw a lady under the boardwalk once, and I walked over to her, and she had bags of cat food. So I was like, oh, that's,
It's
you
actually
know,
really helpful for us to have these caretakers
never
as
know.
well when these cats are injured. We actually have two right now at ACC, who were the caretakers of the colonies were feeding them, noticed that there was something wrong with them, and they tracked them and brought them to us for treatment. And now, you know, one of these guys, it was basically just a broken toe. So we can fix them up, we can vaccinate them, we can neuter them, we can put them back outside where, you know, with their family and their friends and their caretaker. So those caretakers play a really, really important part with keeping those cats healthy too.
Now, speaking of keeping pets healthy, are there any resources that you both might know of that that might help people who might be struggling with affording to take care of their pets? I know there's not that much out there, but maybe anything that you do know of could be very helpful for people, especially during these times.
Yeah, I'll just jump in there. You know, because we were talking about spay neuter, if you don't mind, I'll just share a couple of spay neuter resources in case people are thinking that that's an obstacle to getting your pet the surgery. There are a lot of options in New York City. Animal Care Centers of NYC, where Dr. Miranda and I are from, we have a community pets program that I think many of your park members may be familiar with because we've had clinics in the area. So we have our own clinics. We don't do spay neuter at those, but we do partner with the Toby Project, which offers free, or we work with them to provide free spay neuter for clients. So if anyone, is looking for an appointment, we can work with them, and people can email communitypets@nycacc.org. I can send all this later. Those surgeries are in a mobile van in the Bronx, but it's open to anyone in the 5 boroughs. Then, of course, the ASPCA has, they have their spay neuter mobile vans, which I'm sure everyone has seen around. And because of, I think because of COVID now, there's a link and a waitlist process, so I can send that as well. And there are even more options. So again, spay neuter, there's lots of options. I won't go into this now, but if anyone ever has any questions about that, or vaccines, low cost vaccines, or low cost vet care in general, they can always email us at either communitypets@nycacc.org, and we have a bunch of resources. We can try to direct you to the best one, or admissions@nycacc.org. That's our surrender prevention team will also look at that. So you could try both of those. I will say for low cost vet care, it is tough, I think, for the general upkeep. It's big city. I think we need a lot more from that, I think. And I'm just looking for, in general, basic care, it might be worth trying. I know there's the Astoria Animal Society, which is full service, low cost vet care, obviously in Queens. I think their exam fee is $35. So, if you haven't had your pet, just looked over in a while, it's worth looking at, making an appointment. In Jackson Heights, there's a Vet Wheels mobile clinic, and I can share that link. So, there are a few, and rather than, I guess, going on about this, again, if anyone has any questions, they can always email communitypets@nycacc.org or admissions@nycacc.org, and people can try to help. And also, if you're not having any luck, if you're not able to find, if you think there's nothing you can do, but you'd have to surrender your pet to a shelter, which is a big reason that animals come to us. People have animals who have medical needs that they can't meet. Our team can hopefully find resources for you, or maybe even, subsidize some vet care. So we might be able to work with you to find a good solution. So again, if you're facing a difficult situation, it's worth reaching out and seeing what we might be able to do, who we can refer you to, or how we can help.
Great, thank you.
That's awesome.
What about vaccinations? That's another big thing at the dog park. We all know that rabies is required, for any dog that wants to be in public, or in general is required. Any other vaccinations that you would recommend, especially if you take your dog to the dog park and they're exposed to other dogs? I know there was the canine flu. There's other things that they could transmit to one another. Any recommendations?
Sure. So in New York, we have the 3 main vaccines that we require for every dog. Those are the rabies. Then there's something called the DA2PP, which is basically it prevents upper respiratory diseases. It includes several different viruses that they can spread to each other. In the shelter, we call it CIRDC. So if you've ever been in a shelter, you will hear the word CIRDC, which is Canine Infectious Respiratory Disease Complex. So that vaccine covers several of the usual culprits, basically. Then you have Bordetella, which is a bacteria that is also kind of part of that respiratory disease complex. Definitely recommend those 3 vaccines, and I mean, any veterinarian is going to recommend those to you. As far as other vaccines that I do recommend, if you are going to be boarding your animal, I do recommend the canine influenza vaccine, which is CIV. It's a 2-shot vaccine, and then it's updated yearly, the same way as the other ones. And canine influenza can be really devastating. It's a virus that can really sweep through and cause a lot of mortality in canine populations. So that is one that I definitely recommend. And then my second favorite vaccine is leptospirosis, which we were talking about before earlier. So the leptospirosis is a type of bacteria, basically, that's spread through the urine of wild animals. Originally, it was thought to be like a hunting dog's disease. You know, they're splashing through puddles that animals have urinated in, they get it, and it can cause some really severe kidney and liver disease. However, there are rats in New York City, there are mice everywhere, so we are seeing these like small pocket pet Fifth Avenue things coming in with leptospirosis. In Pennsylvania, where I was trained, we consider it a core vaccine at the school that I went to. We were like, and you are also going to get leptospirosis, and it is not negotiable. So
Right.
yeah, those are my favorite vaccines.
Wow.
That's great information. Karen, any questions?
I've been trying to think of some and I can't. But I will say, what's the recommendation for the average dog or cat in between vaccines? How often do I need to get a booster?
Generally, they're updated yearly. There are people who prefer the titers as opposed to vaccinating every year. That's fine too. Titers are a much more expensive option, and vaccines, you know, having the yearly updates of your vaccines is just a surefire way to know that their immune response is high and they will not be affected by those diseases. If vaccine titer or antibody titers is something that you would prefer to do as opposed to vaccinating again, I'm sure that's something that your regular vet could offer to you. But in general, vaccinating every year. For rabies, it's every 3 years.
And should we be using the flea medications now? I mean, not flea, mosquito medications now, tick is this the time of year that we should be using it now, or is it later?
I was trained in Pennsylvania and I grew up in Florida. For me, heartworm, flea, and tick is year round.
All year.
Yeah, and you know, we still do get mosquitoes in the city when it's colder. Obviously, not in the dead of winter, but just to make sure that that protection is always. It just becomes a monthly thing. It's a routine. You know, we're not going to forget it. We're going to have a schedule for it. It happens on this day. It just makes it easier than remembering, like, oh my God, I should have done it last month. Quick, let me get a prescription for my vet.
So it's no harm to get it or anything like that.
Nope.
Good. Thanks.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up, Karen, because that is a big problem. Mosquitoes are a huge problem in Rockaway. So knowing that you know, just that's a really good reminder to everybody. It's something that's super preventable. All they need to do is take a treat, and what dog doesn't like treats, right?
Yes.
So yeah, so that's a really good reminder. Any other closing comments that you want people to know just in general about taking care of their pets?
I mean, in general, usually when people hear that I'm a vet, I'm hit with a bunch of different questions about all these things that they've kind of been bottling up and everything. Just make sure that you have a relationship with a veterinarian who is able to answer these questions for you and work with you. There's nothing more valuable than your personal vet who knows you, who knows your animal, and is available to you, in whatever capacity they can be, to make sure that they're getting the best care. So develop a relationship with a veterinarian. You will not regret it.
Dr. Miranda, thank you so much for joining us this evening. All of this information was really, really helpful, and I hope that we get a lot of views on it, because it's super important, all this information that you gave to us. And we will be posting this on the Facebook page, and we'll also post it to YouTube. Alex, thank you. As always, it's been a pleasure having you, and having Dr. Miranda. Karen, any final thoughts?
No.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone again.
Hope to see you at the park soon in person.
Yes. I mean, we hope to have our vaccine clinics back in the park too. So if you need them, remember, we can help with that.
We'd love that.